Instagram. Hello. Good morning. Welcome to Align Day 3. Today is all about inner summer ovulation, full moon vibes, and the mother archetype. So exciting. Once you're here, let me know. Drop a comment and tell us what day of your cycle you are on. If you're following the moon cycle, if you're following your menstrual cycle. Yeah, where are you? How can we find you in space? How will you locate yourself and describe your location in this spiral, this cycle that is ever turning and unfolding and shifting? One of the things I love about cycle work is we can't get identified because it's always on the move. One of my Buddhist friends once told me, don't build the house of your ego on the shifting sands. And I think of that with cycle work because every day gives way to a new experience. We're always changing. Nothing is permanent. All right, let's light a candle. I've got all my oils here. I've been really getting back into diffusing oils like in every room of my house. It just feels so sacred and I've really been craving that. Maybe it's because I'm in my inner summer. I don't know. So I am on day 18 of my cycle, and I tend to ovulate around day 16. So I think I'm just a couple days out of ovulation and probably about 12 days away from my next period. Where are you in your cycle, dear ones? Let's share that for sure. Just get in the habit of talking with each other from this context of where we are in our cycle so that we can have deeper intimacy and compassion and understanding, and we can gauge our relationships from that place. So, lighting a candle to symbolize our shared intention to be here on the cycle, on this wheel of awareness, and feeling the connection of all of those who are with us live and in the replay, all of those around the world who are and who have paid attention and deepened their awareness of their cycle. Beautiful ones. Let's get into it. All right. So, inner summer. It's most everyone's favorite season. And I find that especially true for folks who are just starting to work with their cycle. It's like, I didn't know this was a thing. I thought my cycle just meant my period. No, my dear ones, you have 4 seasons and the summer is your ovulation. So what if we shifted the conversation away from periods, or at least to not have so much of the share of our cycle conversations around periods, and taught these young girls who are starting their cycle lives about the power of ovulation? How would that shift everything from sex education to teaching about pleasure to teaching about, you know, the power of women, the power of us, of humans, the power to create whatever we choose, because you don't just ovulate to create babies. Okay, you ovulate to create whatever the hell you want. And when we unlock this superpower of ovulation, all 4 seasons really come into play, and we see ovulation as that mountaintop, that peak that we're hiking up to in our spring and we are leaving in our autumn. And what happens at that tippy top point is all of those hormones, all of that energy that's been building has a purpose, and In terms of the menstrual cycle, the literal purpose is to release an egg through the fallopian tube and, the hopes, the biological evolutionary hopes that it will be fertilized and, implanted in the uterus, and then it will be nourished with progesterone, and then it will develop into a human being, right? But that's just from the focus of evolution and biology, but you can also see your creative potential in other areas. So I love to think about putting on these challenges, for example, during my inner summer, and I planned this one perfectly. I love to think about opportunities where I need to show up more in my life. If I had had this knowledge when I was planning my wedding, maybe I would have been really sure to plan my wedding around my ovulation so that I was feeling in my sexiest, my most dazzling, my least insecure, least self-judgmental space. Because don't you notice when you are in your inner summer, it just feels like you are your most beautiful and you look so good and everyone looks so good and it feels like the whole world is spinning for your enjoyment. The whole world is turning you on. So we can really harness that power in our creative projects, in our social gatherings, in all areas of our life. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, maximum energy, maximum love, maximum beauty, attraction, maximum bliss. This is the sexiest time of the menstrual cycle. So it's a great time for healing shame around sex and shame around our pleasure, to kind of rewrite those stories that we've inherited. Because isn't it true that this energy, this attraction, this eros is what creates all life? Yes, we can celebrate it. So the second half of our cycle, it's called the luteal phase. So we have the follicular phase and then we have the luteal phase, and that actually starts at ovulation. So there's that one peak day. Really, ovulation happens in a moment. But we like to think of our inner summer as the time, the week or so after that moment when we're still feeling really good. So this is the peak moment where testosterone makes its little appearance in the cycle so that that one egg is released. And it happens about 14 days prior to menstruation, no matter how long or short your cycle is. So if you have a longer cycle, or maybe you've skipped cycles, what that means is you didn't ovulate, right? So when you finally did ovulate, maybe on day 40 or 30, you bled 14 days later. And I really do recommend tracking ovulation, particularly, for fertility purposes or avoiding pregnancy, but also it's just a beautiful way to deepen your own cycle practice. And so you can invest in a BBT, a basal body temperature thermometer, that shows you 2 extra decimal points of your temperature so that you can really track those minute changes in your temperature, because your temperature will spike just before you ovulate. And I did BBT tracking for a while, and it's not part of my practice at the moment, but it's something I think I will come back to, because it's really sweet to see that little temperature spike and to know, okay, it's happening, and in about 2 weeks from that moment, I can expect my period. And sure enough, she does arrive. It's really interesting. Another thing I'll say about ovulation is that there are a lot of health benefits for ovulation. There's a lot of mental health benefits to having your natural ovulation cycle, which you can please read more about on your own. And I'm just now starting to understand So there can be a lot of harm in stopping ovulation. So it's something to take into consideration. You know, so many of us were prescribed birth control as soon as we came of age to have a menstrual cycle. And it's honestly, it's overprescribed. It's overprescribed for menstrual pain, for acne, for a whole host of things. And we shouldn't take it so lightly because birth control, hormonal contraception literally ceases your ovulation. So you're not getting those neurological and other health benefits of having your ovulation. And if you think about it, if you're not having ovulation, you're kind of in a perpetual inner autumn phase. You know, it's kind of that heaviness and that downward slump, and kind of bringing some of our magic and our creativity to a halt. So I know some people do need to be on it, and of course I'm all about, you know, women controlling their own fertility, regulating their own, you know, decisions about birth, and motherhood, but it's something we need to take into consideration because we don't want to miss out on these awesome gifts. Okay, so this is what everything's been building to, this inner summer. You know, even for the most introverted and inert of us, we're gonna feel at our extrovert peak during this week, most likely. But of course, just like we spoke about yesterday, your journal is your best friend. So pay attention to how you feel in your inner summer. And I would love to hear in the comments if you already know and you've already picked up on how you feel differently at the peak of your cycle. So they say approximately days 12 to 19. I really don't like these approximates, but I think it's important when you're starting out to kind of feel into and imagine and kind of measure yourself against, just to develop an understanding. So around days 12 to 19. But as I said, 14 days before you bleed. And you really want to plan for serving and loving others. So, what do I mean by that? Let me say, in our culture, you know, women, we've been so socialized, right? To take care of everyone else, to put everyone before ourselves. Maybe you saw this modeled in your own mother, or other women in your life. And, you know, we can get really identified with that role. And so I like to think of it, it has a natural place. You know, we need community and we need to be in reciprocity in our relationships. None of us should be taking all the time and never giving. None of us should be giving all the time and never taking. And the menstrual cycle is a beautiful model of how to give in certain phases and receive in other phases. Don't take any of this to the extreme. This is just a theme to work with during that season. So for our inner summer, when we're ovulating, we can feel like super women. Like we can feel limitless and truly boundless. Our energy is higher. You know, our estrogen is high. We get that little spike of testosterone. We've got a lot of strength. We've got a lot of joy, potentially creative power. So it's a great time to pour into your community, because you better believe in the next couple of weeks you're not going to feel as much like doing it. So do it now. Show up for your loved ones, and don't get too identified with this version of yourself, because it will give way again, and then you'll be the one needing support. And we can always think about the cycle, the any of these cycles as metaphor. So for the archetypes here, you know, maiden, mother, wild woman, crone, these represent times in our life. So I just entered the mother phase of my life. And that doesn't mean that I'm going to be a biological mother. what that means for me is that I've really entered those like peak fertility and creative, energetic years where I'm going to do my life's work. And I'm trying to make an effort to cast off patriarchal gaze and a lot of those burdens that my maiden really struggled with. And I've made a decision, to be in my own mother archetype energy. And someone I love, Sarah, I think her name is Sarah Durham Wilson. Don't quote me on that. She's the mother spirit on Instagram, and she teaches the maiden to mother journey. Um, she says that women really don't enter the mother years until their 40s, like typically in our culture, because we are so patriarchalized and we are so good at keeping women in these little girl boxes. There's a real obsession with youth and yeah, a real fear of aging, and it can be hard for women in our culture to ascend into that mother archetype. And she really paints it as a picture of casting off the male gaze. And you do it even more so with every coming phase of your life, right? In your inner wild woman, which might be the menopausal years of your life, you give less fucks than you've ever given, And so you're always caring less and less about that male gaze, about what others think of you. And hopefully, we're like ascending this archetypal ladder to get closer and closer to the goddess or to that ideal or to a more perfect kind of self love, is how I think of it. And they're all beautiful and they all have a place. But that's one way to kind of look at it. And so the mother years maybe are around like the mid to late 30s to 40s. It just depends. I made a decision to kind of cross over, and that's more for my own intention. Like I'm ready to be in the mother space. So there's like a spiritual dimension, and then there's, of course, a very literal physical dimension of actually being in your fertile window, being at that peak energy. But some women remain in maiden energy spiritually their entire lives. So you can think about your own mother. Did she ever really fully embody this maiden archetype of, serving and loving, but starting with self love? That's how I think of it. So, anyway, I digress. But yes, what to plan for: serving and loving others, teaching and sharing your wisdom and skills. Plan for anything that requires you to show up fully in your power and put on a show. And what to avoid: avoid controlling everyone and everything around you to get them to your level. This is a big one I see a lot of the time in myself. Like when I'm in my inner summer, I'm like, why can't everybody just be on my level? Why can't my husband just match my energy, and my adventurous spirit, and just want to do all the same things that I want to do? And I have to kind of keep that in check and be like, oh yeah, I'm in my inner summer. It's just a good thing to be aware of. And avoid throwing self-care completely out the window, because if we're always giving and serving and showing up, and we have this amazing, seemingly endless energy, it can be easy to forget that we need to still show up for ourselves and pour into that cup. And avoid, as we said yesterday for the inner spring, the same is true today, avoid being tied to your desk, because the whole world is your playground, really. So you might feel like a jitteriness this time, like you've had too much coffee. And so to even be more embodied, more grounded is important. Filling your own cup. Yeah. Plan plan for these things, but don't be too rigid because, again, your journal's your best friend. You're going to know what you need more than anybody else. So it's associated with the summer solstice because obviously it's the inner summer. So summer solstice is Litha in the pagan wheel of the year that I follow. Um, you can research more about those rituals, and we're going to talk a little bit about it though. I'll go ahead and skip ahead to that. And that's coming up, right? In mid-June, midsummer, you might have heard it called. It's really that time that the sun is closest to our earth. So, in some cultures, the sun is the divine feminine, and others, it's the divine masculine. You know, think of it however you will. In astrology, it's the ego, right? Or that self that we express to the world. Um, Summer and inner summer is associated with the fire element. So in the tarot, that also relates to the wand, the suit of wands, which is all about kind of the ego, and not in a negative way, but like consciousness, how we, human willpower, how we express ourselves to others. Um, and so it's the same with the summer solstice. We're kind of at that peak of our lives, of our self-expression, of our personality. And it's really the themes of the full moon, the theme of the sun and the full moon together, maybe the feminine and masculine. So the theme of sensuality and union, divine union, pleasure, fire. You know, maybe you want to have like a big bonfire on the summer solstice on a beach somewhere. You know, it's whatever kind of festival you can imagine with lots of people kind of just not caring about anything but that night and how good they feel and dancing, you know, whatever comes to mind for you. Start planning because it'll be here soon. That's what I think of when I think of Litha and summer solstice. All right, so getting back into inner summer. We are going to practice some embodiment this morning. I thought it would be good to focus on the heart because it's the mother archetype. So it's all about that unconditional love and that sweetness and your own goodness and remembering that. So, and if you joined us for the opening circle, you'll remember some of these same things that we did, but we're going to do them again because it's so sweet. All right, so we can just start by tapping. You can make like a little bird beak and just use gentle pressure here. We don't need to bruise ourselves. Tapping the sternum along that heart meridian, maybe closing the eyes down, just waking up. Breathing into this space. Maybe noticing if there's any tenderness here or any grief coming up. Just say to yourself, I'm here. See how that dissolves it. We can kind of spread it out to tap along the collarbones. Does that feel good to you? Really get inside the feeling. Now we can just kind of do some gentle rubbing where the collarbones meet below the throat. Breathing deeply. We're regulating our nervous systems. Can you feel it? Doing some gentle scrubbing along the neck and the throat. One side and then the other. And all along those collarbones and the sternum that we just tapped. Hello, the whole heart space. Maybe even a little scrub down into the belly. Let your intuition guide you in all things. So now we're going to work on getting our head aligned over our heart. This is really important because as we've evolved or devolved, our head has really come forward with all of our technology, and it kind of cuts that brain heart connection. So we want to get our head aligned over our heart back in space anytime we remember it, right? And start to notice how that feels differently. You might feel some tensioning in the upper back that will release, and you can bring your breath there and your awareness to help it relax. And your core will naturally fire. Like all of these things will come online. The pelvic floor, your foundation, everything will come online when you align and you practice it daily. So don't be afraid to bring that head over the heart. And we're going to actually reach the arms back behind. So kind of at like an angle. So they're really behind. And we're going to flex our fingers so our end points are reaching out and behind a little bit. And this helps us, right? You can shake out the head. This helps us align our head over our hearts because we're bringing a little bit of tensioning there. Good. And so now we're going to inhale and exhale, curl our fingers to the tops of our shoulders, still keeping our elbows back in space. So we're going to do that a few times. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Good. You can roll that out and just notice how you feel different already. That breathing into the heart space and aligning the head over heart and the position of the shoulders, it really helps keep everything open. Now, maybe for you that awakens some anxiety because it can be very vulnerable to have our heart open, to have our head kind of behind our heart, right? It feels like we're revealing a very sensitive, vulnerable part of our body to the world to potentially harm us. So that's why we're always rolling our shoulders over. We're trying to protect our heart. But to kind of give it this opposition, can feel really vulnerable, but it can also feel really sweet and really good. I'm curious how that felt for you, dear ones, if you want to let us know in the comments. Yeah, for me, when I started doing this practice, I would cry like all the time. There was so much grief and emotion and vulnerability. But now when I do it more and more, I feel strong. I feel powerful. That anxiety can arise, but I can dissolve it because I remember that I don't have to cling to any sensation or identify with it, right? I can just let it flow, let it go. And it's really freeing. Beautiful one. Put your hand on your heart, close the eyes down. Recognizing your own capacity to love unconditionally. It might feel vulnerable and scary, but it's beautiful and it is your strength. And when you combine it with sacred boundaries, it truly is limitless. Just feeling your own inner mother within. Her strength, her love. Her open-heartedness. Deep breath in. And let it go. Beautiful. So, so sweet. All right. So let's talk about self-care for our inner summer, whether it's your ovulation or if you're following the moon, it'll be during that full moon time. So journaling, as I said yesterday, my morning practice involves morning pages, movement, and meditation. Those are my three M's. And they change depending on where I am in the cycle. So for inner summer, journaling can be quite chaotic. My handwriting will actually transform into like messy, jumbled letters that it can be harder to go back and read. It's hilarious to see this shift happen because I'm all over the place. It can be hard to focus on one thing at a time, but there's still lots of productive energy, nurturing energy, still lots of lists like we spoke about yesterday in the inner spring. I still bring that kind of listicle energy to my summer. And I can really try to have the intention during my inner summer of making mantras. So actually channeling that sweet, loving energy into these good phrases for myself. I think I'm beautiful because I'm filled with love for the whole world. Or, I might see the world through rose-colored glasses, but this is what I see when I do. And maybe that's a reminder I'm going to need in the inner autumn, in the inner winter. So trying to capture the beauty that's all around us in this inner summer phase, and writing down those reminders of how good we felt about ourselves and about the world, to come back to. So if I journal at all, I try to hold that intention. But I definitely have that peak energy, and movement is gonna be the focus of my self-care during my inner summer. So I love to dance and do cardio again in the inner summer. I try to up my amount of workouts that I'm doing, just because I got to get it in while I can, and I know in the weeks to come it's gonna really trickle out. So it's a great time to try new workouts, to sign up for anything really weird that you've never tried before. I feel like I judge myself a lot less during my inner summer, so I'm more likely to invite a new friend to even do something new and spontaneous. Um, yeah, I'm just thinking like one time I did yoga on a pirate ship with a friend during my inner summer, and it was just the perfect example of that inner summer movement. It's like, why not? Speaking of yoga, here's some yoga poses from Jamie Botian. She shares that you want to focus on power poses during your inner summer. So anything really strength related is great here because you've got the energy for it. So goddess pose, chair pose, warrior two, any kind of arm balances, really working on your crow pose, your crane pose. And the movement she wants us to focus on are holds. So in our inner spring, we talked about really flowing, fluid, feminine movement. But in our peak inner summer week, it's going to be more of those strength holds. How long can you hold those poses? How can you tap into your inner strength and power, firing the core? You might find a little shake. You're really strengthening yourself at this time. And we always want to connect to the breath and be safe when we do this. And the yoga training I'm in right now, we are really focusing on those mounds that we extended back in our practice. In our yoga poses, we have these mounds and we have mounds on the bottom of our feet. So when we connect really mindfully in yoga to those mounds, to that support, we naturally are powering up. We're not in this kind of frozen energy. It's more of a flow that comes from the earth and releases anything that's stuck in our bodies. And I can talk more about that if anyone has questions. But that's what my movement looks like in inner summer. What does your movement look like? Um, yeah. So let's chat. That self care. I guess I didn't talk about meditation. Um, Again, it's a great time to try those quirky, weird new things. I can get kind of lonely and restless in my silent meditations during my summer phase. So I might sign up for a group meditation class. I might focus on um, manifestation visualizations because that's what full moon energy is all about, right? It's that peak. Um, it's when we're kind of harvesting the bounty and we're celebrating all that we've manifested. So it's a great time to learn about more woo woo things that you would be more judgmental and wary of in other phases of the cycle. And I love Kundalini yoga and those kriyas during the inner summer phase. Awakening Kundalini energy is really powerful when you're ovulating. After all, Kundalini is the divine feminine. So, yeah, that's my self care during the inner summer. Get curious about what you need, you can trust it. And now let's chat a bit about relationships and adventure in the inner summer. So, this, as I said, plan those big social gatherings that you have control over. You know, sometimes you're going to have to go to a wedding in your inner winter. That happened to me last fall. It was kind of sad because I had been looking forward to this wedding for so long. And of course, it ended up being day one of my cycle. But I still looked so good and tried to bring some elements from my summer into it. And then I had to set lots of boundaries and like get off the dance floor when I was really not feeling it and go home and, you know, get in bed. But the best is when it all aligns, all the stars align, and you have those big celebrations during your inner summer. So I would urge you to track your cycle so that you know when those things are coming up and you can kind of adjust your energy and plan for it. Yeah. Another thing I'll say about friendships during the inner summer, friendships and romantic any kind of relationship really, you're gonna get a little bit of a testosterone peak. That's what actually releases the egg at ovulation. It's just a blip, but it can spike pretty high just depending on your endocrine system. And I am so aware of it now. Mine happened 2 days ago, and I had a fight with my partner. And when I recognized that it was the testosterone, it helped me have so much compassion. And I was even able to share that with him, not as an excuse, but like oh, I forgot this was happening, and I think I'm feeling this way partly because of this. And you know, there have been some aggression because testosterone is really that divine masculine hormone, and it can bring in aggression into your system. And it can just, for me, I turn on a dime. Like, it's just some pent up anger gets released. It's kind of crazy, but it doesn't last very long in the inner summer. So just to notice it and release it and have understanding and compassion if that comes up in a relationship moment. So, yeah. Another thing about our social lives in the inner summer, we're showing up for our community. So it's a great time to be more community minded. Maybe you want to volunteer in your inner summer. Maybe you want to plan to visit a friend in need or drop off some food for a loved one or a letter or just call someone who might be lonely. You're going to get so much gratitude and good karma from doing this, and you're going to feel less depleted when you do it in your inner summer and when you balance it with self-care and when you plan for it. So we can do this with intention. And in terms of your romantic life, of course, This is your fertility window, so you're going to be more turned on. You're going to be more, flirty and romantic naturally. And you're going to actually be at your most physically attractive as well. And everyone's going to look more attractive to you. This is evolution at work, guys. So, really lean into that in your sex life. Try new things during this time. Um, as I said before, release any shame around sex or pleasure if you can during this time. And remember, it's that life force, it's what sustains and creates life. And of course, you're ovulating. So if you're not trying to get pregnant, take extra precautions during this time. All right, awesome. So let's chat about your life's work and your inner summer. So as a business owner, I try to plan these types of like Instagram lives and trainings and podcasts around my ovulation because it's just natural for me to show up during this time. It does not feel like I'm pushing myself. It tends to feel that way, I should say, not always. And it's all about serving. So, how can you bring that serving energy if you're a business owner to your clients and to your audience? Giving things away for free like I am this week. It just feels aligned for me when I'm already in this good serving mother energy. Like I want to share my wisdom and I want to share what I've learned and what's worked for me. And I also want to have that engagement and that interaction with my community that fills me up during this season. But you also have to make sure you're not over planning. That can be one of the hardest things about the inner summer is you're so jazzed to connect and commune with so many that you could find yourself scheduling a week or two in advance if people aren't available. And then before you know it, you filled up your inner autumn and your inner winter with social engagements. So really bringing this awareness can help you plan and make sure that you're not doing too much. And that's why I say, right, the day of your cycle you will be on in your calendar for every day. So when you go to look at your calendar, you see it there. It's not just, oh, I'm going to be bleeding so I can't go to the beach. It's, oh, I'm going to be on day 23. And I know for me, historically, that's a day that I just want to lie in bed and work from home on my laptop. Whatever it is, it's just bringing that awareness in. So that is what I would caution you. Don't just make plans without referencing what day of your cycle you will be on, what season you'll be in. And what does that mean? Well, you might have to plan things a month in advance, and that's okay. Give yourself space and permission to do that. All right. So, mother archetype. Hopefully, you enjoyed your inner mother visualization today. She helped you heal maybe some mother wounds with your own mother. She helped you think about a time when you've burnt out, when you've over depleted yourself, and you were given the opportunity to step into those memories and heal something and to make a commitment to her around how you're going to nurture her and have those healthy boundaries. So hopefully you took notes and you wrote down some ideas for the future. But really her medicine, mother medicine, is nurturing and trust. And I always say we could trust more. We could always trust more because our nervous systems are so wound up in this culture, in this era, right? We have so many distractions and so much busyness for the sake of busyness that our nervous systems are really pushed to their limits. And I think the greatest balm for that is this mother medicine of trust. Like, where could you trust a little bit more? Trust yourself, trust the circumstances, trust the universe, trust your community to hold you. Maybe that means asking for help. Oh my gosh, can you imagine? Trust that people aren't going to flee if you're your true self. Trust really is the answer every time I think about it. Every time I get stuck, the answer is always more trust. So we can use that mother medicine anytime we need it. Mother shadows, inner mother shadows really include overgiving to the point of really depleting ourselves, right? So not respecting healthy boundaries. Does this sound like anyone's mother? I'm curious. Or having no boundaries, like how we tapped into that heart, that limitless love. It really does become limitless when we have healthy boundaries. I know for myself, when I started setting boundaries with loved ones, I was able to trust that I would be balanced and taken care of to the point where I could be fully present, fully engaged, fully holding space for them when we were together, because I wasn't looking for the exit. I wasn't thinking to myself, well, I'm going to be depleted. I'm not going to be able to handle this. Because I knew I had already set that boundary of, this is how much time I have. This is how much energy I have. This is what I can offer you. As Brené Brown says, clear is kind. Ultimately, it is only in everyone's best interest that we over communicate about what level we're at. And the same goes for cycle awareness. If you can say to a loved one, I'm on day 28, and they just know what that means, or I'm on day 1, and they just ask, oh my gosh, what do you need? It shifts culture. It shifts everything, because we don't have to be stuck in these patterns of eternal, endless summer where we are Superwoman or Wonder Woman all month long. Not only is that, cruel and patriarchal and misogynistic to expect, but it's also just not possible. It's not possible for us to be firing on all cylinders 24/7. So in all of this, be playful. When you put on that costume of your mother archetype, remember, it's just a costume. It's just a phase. It's just one of many aspects of your true nature, of the goddess that you get to play in. Don't identify with it. She's not here for very long. And I talk to women who are beginning menopause, or maybe they're smack dab in the middle of it, and they're starting to realize they're not in their mother phase anymore. And we're going to talk about inner autumn tomorrow. Such a good season. But it's really painful for them, because when they were in their inner mother archetype, they were getting so much validation from that, right? Culture, their community was like, wow, you are such a good mother. You are such a good caretaker. You are just such a giver, such a servant. Thank you so much. And their ego got really identified with it. And then when their energy starts to wane and their space gives way and they don't have as much to give, they're like, who am I? Who am I without this role? And that's one of the reasons we don't want to get too identified with it, even in the month-to-month cycle scenario. Enjoy it, but don't cling to it. And if you really don't cling to it, you can fully embody and enjoy this time for what it is. Just like life as a whole, right? Oh, so good. Okay. So, oh, so mother shadows are over giving identification, but also this flight response. So we talked about the nervous system with the inner spring. Something that maiden has a shadow around is that fawn response, that people pleasing nature. Mother, people pleasing is still there. It's changed a little bit. But nervous system wise, I associate the mother archetype with the flight response, particularly self abandonment. So running away from our own needs. Um, and that is part of the sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight. So, those long muscles of the hamstrings like tensing up to run, that heart beating to pump blood to those muscles, the adrenaline spiking. She's really going to run away from her own needs. And so, any kind of regulation we can do to calm down that flight response is going to be really key during our inner summer. Anything to bring that sense of trust back into an embodied nervous system. So, we can do the heart attunement that we practiced earlier. There's a lot we can do. Child's pose. Feel into what would help you trust more in those moments. And then we didn't talk too much about the fire element, but that is her domain. She really is a fire goddess. So we can think about fire burning all of our attachments, burning everything we've gotten too identified with, burning that old story. And then we can also think about fire as alchemy. It takes one substance and it transforms it into another. So alchemizing our suffering into joy, alchemizing that resentment and that bitterness that can come up when we're depleted, and turning it into boundaries and self-compassion. That's how I think about fire. And really, when we embody our fire, we remember to be alive. Just like that Litha image in our minds of people dancing around a bonfire at the summer solstice. Just be alive because you are. That's it. You don't need any excuse beyond that. Just really feel your aliveness at this peak moment. So, a ritual I would invite you into today is a burning ritual. Do not burn your house down, please, for the love of Goddess. But you can make a list. I'll give you a couple options. Number one, you can make a burnout list, which is to list everything that could burn you out if you continue at this pace. Let your intuition guide you here. Maybe it's work. Maybe it's family. Just write it down as a list or a letter. And then number two, you could make a bitterness and boundaries list. So draw a line down the center of your paper. On the left, make a list of everything you're feeling bitter about. Just bitter, 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 bitter. Let it all go onto this paper. No one's going to read it or judge you. It's okay. And on the right, I want you to look at that bitterness and create a list of boundaries. Your bitterness is pointing you home to your boundaries that you need to be setting in your life. It's not a bad thing. It's a compass. It's a signpost. So are you going to listen to it and acknowledge it? As women, we're taught just to stuff that bitterness down and that resentment and that discontentment. But what if we saw it as an indication that something's off balance? And then we actually alchemized it into a boundary. That would be a game changer. All right. And then, of course, you're going to burn these lists. So get you a fire-safe bowl, have some water handy, maybe do it outside. Just be really careful, of course. And really notice how it feels to imagine these things burning away, releasing them. Any questions, I am here for it. You can DM me. You can still book your free cycle coaching session this week. I hope you will. Thank you, dear ones, for being with me for these trainings and for this week. It is so much fun to hear from you all what day of your cycle you're on, how you're finding the challenge, the trainings, the visualizations. I love it so much. Tomorrow we are diving into Inner Autumn, which is, like I said, one of my favorite seasons. It's the most challenging. It's the most challenging by far for everyone I think that I've talked to. But it can be really sweet once we've learned to set these boundaries. I believe our training tomorrow is at 1. I'm just going to check that real quick. Yeah, it's at 1 o'clock. So I really hope that you'll come and learn all about the inner wild woman archetype. Wild woman has so much to share with us as a society. It's really exciting. It's really exciting. All right, beautiful ones. Thank you for being with me today. Go do your ritual. Go do your morning pages if you haven't already, and your inner mother visualization for today. And DM me if you want to set up your free cycle coaching session. And of course, just a reminder that I have just launched Ebb and Flow, which is a brand new cycle coaching program.